So when it comes to delivering adaptations of campaigns across local markets, what does it actually take to make it really work?
Simple question, complex answer. But it all starts at the beginning, whether it's the relationship with your production team or a partner. It often starts at that sort of initial, what we call the onboarding stages. And when we're looking at onboarding and working with clients, whether it's their global teams or their local teams, it's vital to ensure everybody is involved, whether it's regional, local marketing teams with global or headquarters. This can then instill that clarity on the roles and responsibilities for each team, and it avoids those sort of painful and often costly disagreements that can fall into the process further down the line, or at worst, produce badly adapted and underperforming campaigns, because that's the last thing anybody wants when you're looking at the returns and the value for every single dollar that's spent on a campaign. So that onboarding process, when it's well defined and comprehensive, it will set the tone for the relationship, and it does have a large bearing on how the work will perform. And for ourselves at Spring Production, onboarding has been a massive part of what we've done and emphasized from the very beginning of the business, because we needed to have a robust and involved process. And whilst it's tailored for each client that we work with based on what they specifically need, it will typically involve a couple of key elements. The first one is that sense of alignment. What is the scope of work? What are the processes? What are the workflows? How is the work being briefed? How are we auditing the existing assets to ensure they're fit for purpose? What are the reporting and communication lines, quality control processes, and so on? So that's the sort of first part of it. And then for us, particularly when we're thinking about adaptation campaigns, it's always to think about how can we learn the best way to implement this without too much risk for the client. Now, we usually start with a pilot project. It's a quick way to understand what the blockers are, what the showstoppers are. It can also allow us to showcase some skills and identify gains, so we can learn a lot quickly, and then that can feed into bigger campaigns further down the line. And then as we move forwards, all of those learnings and those processes start to feed into how we're actually going to run the work. Setting up the production team based on the commitment and needs, how we're going to liaise with each other, what's the view that will allow us to review things quickly and make course corrections. So all of those different processes get put into place. So that's the first big area that we always look at in order to make it work. And I guess the second big area, which will be familiar to a lot of people is as well as having a sound process for the work to be adapted, the other requirement to make it work is really having that content production planning involved earlier on in the stages. So typically, like any process for a campaign or piece of content, there'll be a strategic process, there'll be a creative process, then finally it's given to the production side of things to produce. That's fundamentally an issue, because often in the position that we're in, the creative production end of the market, is we get provided with various assets, but they just won't work when we're trying to adapt them. They will not be able to have the flexibility that they need to both be customized for specific markets, be that on imagery, texts, messaging, whatever it may be, and keep the sort of core brand messages in the same point. So we always push as hard as we can to be considered early on, and when the creatives or the strategic thinking and the creative process is taking place, to think about how this could be adapted across 6 markets, 16 markets, 60 markets, whatever it may be, because without that in place early on, it fundamentally will only create problems further down the line when you come to rolling it out. So I guess they're the sort of 2 big areas that we look at when we're thinking about how we actually make this work on a very much day-to-day basis.